The forest moon of Hastara smelled of wet pine and ozone, a scent that clung to the morning mist drifting between the barracks. The outpost was alive with the hum of alien machinery, sleek, precise, and sterile. Silver-armored soldiers of the Valen Dominion moved in perfect synchrony, their rifles glowing faintly with contained plasma. They spoke in clipped syllables, their voices modulated through translation implants. To them, efficiency was beauty. To them, humanity was an anomaly. Sergeant Rains sat apart from the bustle, methodically cleaning the long rifle cradled across his knees. His uniform, a patchwork of faded greens and tan mesh, looked out of place among the polished armor and gleaming weapon racks. The Valen troops passed him with sideways glances, half curiosity, half disdain. His rifle clattered softly as he reassembled it, metal on metal, an ancient rhythm that fell alive in his hands. It wasn't a plasma weapon or a railgun. It was a machine of gears, gas, and recoil. Captain Tarl, the unit's commanding Valen, stopped nearby, his translucent crest flickering with irritation. "That relic still functions, human?" he asked, voice sharp, almost musical. Rains looked up through the shadow of his hood, eyes steady. "Better than most people I've met," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. A ripple of laughter spread through the surrounding aliens. The humans on base, only 6 in total, were tolerated specialists, observers from a species too stubborn to vanish. Their homeworld had been ravaged centuries ago, their fleets obsolete, their tactics called barbaric. Yet, every now and then, a human was invited to serve among the galactic ranks, mostly as a gesture of diversity. Rains was one such relic, an artifact of a warlike age the galaxy believed it had outgrown. Private Mesa, a young Valen with gleaming black scales, leaned toward her captain. "Why keep him, sir? His methods are inefficient. He doesn't even use charge packs." Rain smiled faintly, but said nothing. He'd heard it all before, primitive, crude, outdated. To them, everything about humanity was an embarrassment of noise and imperfection. But he knew something they didn't. Technology could advance beyond reason, but war never did. It only changed its shape. At the morning briefing, the outpost holographic table displayed sensor readings in pale green light. An unidentified mass moved through the forests beyond the perimeter. No life sign data matched known species. Tarl dismissed it with a flick of his talon. "Likely electromagnetic interference," he declared. "No need for alarm." Rain studied the data quietly. The pattern of movement wasn't random. It was deliberate, coordinated. He'd seen that kind of spacing before. Creatures hunting in packs. "Captain," he said slowly, "if it's interference, it's walking straight toward us." Tarl's crest dimmed, signaling annoyance. "Your primitive instincts are unnecessary. The Dominion's energy arrays will handle any threat." That night, the humans gathered by the outer wall. The forest beyond was an unbroken shadow, and the air hummed faintly with the charge of defense grids. Rains leaned against a crate, smoking something that smelled of oil and leaves. The younger corporal beside him shifted nervously. "They don't take you seriously, do they, sir?" Rains exhaled smoke and watched it twist into the darkness. "They will," he said. From the tree line came a low, resonant sound, almost a vibration, like the forest itself breathing. Lights flickered briefly along the perimeter. Somewhere deep inside the compound, alarms began to wail. The Valen guards rushed to formation, plasma rifles crackling to life, their perfect symmetry already beginning to falter. Rain set down his cigarette, picked up his rifle, and checked the worn brass casings in his magazine. "Told you," he murmured, sliding the bolt forward. "Something's coming, and it doesn't care how advanced you are." The forest exhaled again, louder this time, and the night swallowed the first cries from the scouts. Rains adjusted his scope, the metal cool against his cheek, and waited for the truth to arrive. The first shots of plasma tore through the trees in blinding streaks of blue-white light, shearing branches and boiling sap into steam. Valen soldiers fired in disciplined volleys, their weapons humming as heat bled into the air. Shapes moved between the trunks, fast and low, barely visible except when struck by light. Each hit should have killed. Instead, the creatures staggered, their chitinous hides glowing briefly before dulling again. They kept coming. Captain Tarl barked orders, his confidence wavering as reports flooded his display. Increase output. Overload the emitters if necessary. His troops obeyed, pushing their rifles beyond safe tolerances. Rains watched from the flank, rifle steady, eyes narrowing as he tracked the enemy's advance. He could see it now, the way the creatures flowed, adjusting their spacing with every burst of fire. They were learning. A Valen trooper screamed as one of the things leapt from the undergrowth, slamming into him with enough force to crumple armor. Plasma fire engulfed the attacker, but when the light faded, another took its place. The perimeter line bent inward, then cracked. Panic rippled through the ranks, alien voices rising in pitch as discipline eroded under pressure. Rains fired his first shot. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, the sound a sharp, percussive crack that cut through the energy hum. The round punched through a creature's torso, rupturing something vital. It dropped hard, momentum broken. He fired again, then again, each shot deliberate. The difference was immediate and undeniable. Tarl turned, crest flaring in disbelief. "What are you doing?" "Stopping them," Rains replied, cycling the bolt with practiced ease. "Energy cooks the outside. These things shrug it off. You got to tear them apart." The creatures surged closer, emboldened by the faltering plasma line. Rains advanced a step, then another, planting himself where the defenses had failed. He fired until his magazine ran dry, then slapped in another without looking. Spent casings piled at his feet, hot brass biting through the damp soil. A young Valen, Messa, found herself beside him, rifle shaking. "They adapt too fast," she said, voice thin with fear. "Everything does," Rains answered. "That's why you don't rely on just one trick." He nodded toward the charging shapes. "Aim center mass. Don't wait for them to glow." Messa hesitated, then followed his lead, switching her weapon to its lowest coherence setting. The results were crude but effective. Together, they slowed the advance long enough for the remaining humans to join the line. Their weapons spoke in harsh, mechanical voices, stitching the darkness with kinetic fire. The forest floor became a killing ground, churned mud and shattered bodies marking every meter gained. Still, the creatures pressed forward, fewer now, but angrier. Rains felt the familiar burn in his muscles, the calm that came only in moments like this. War stripped away pretense. It revealed what worked. A sudden impact knocked him sideways, pain flaring along his ribs. He rolled, came up on one knee, and fired point-blank into a lunging silhouette. Blood sprayed hot across his gloves. He grunted, forced himself upright, and kept shooting. Behind him, the outpost's alarms wailed in broken cadence. Power levels dropped as plasma weapons failed one by one. Tarl stared at the battlefield, horror replacing arrogance. "Human," he said quietly, "can you hold?" Rains didn't look back. He braced his rifle and squeezed the trigger again. "Not with this," he said, "but I got something heavier." As the last of the perimeter lights flickered out and the forest surged once more, Rains reached for the sealed crate at his feet, fingers closing around cold steel. The air trembled as Rains opened the crate and drew the weapon free. It was heavier than memory, its matte black frame scarred from a dozen campaigns, yet hummed with reliability in his grip. The M249 caught the faint light of burning trees as he unfolded the bipod and slammed a belt of brass into the feed tray. The aliens stared, some in confusion, others in disbelief, at the crude metal thing the old human treated like sacred relic. Then Rains pulled the charging handle, and the night erupted. The first burst was deafening. The M249 roared with a ferocity the galaxy had forgotten, spewing flame and lead in a continuous scream of defiance. The recoil kicked against his shoulder like a heartbeat, each pulse translating into death. The creatures charging the line jerked mid-stride, their bodies torn open before they hit the ground. There was no radiant glow, no elegant energy discharge, only the brutal percussion of impact. Mesa ducked instinctively as fragments of bark and bone sprayed past. The rhythm of the human weapon filled the clearing, a living drumbeat that seemed to draw the soldiers into motion. Rains moved like he was conducting a ritual, short bursts, quick corrections, eyes never still. He shouted for fields of fire, his voice cutting through panic. The other humans responded immediately, spreading out, flanking, feeding belts of ammunition into his gun. The Valen troops hesitated at first, uncertain how to fit into this chaos, but something primal in the sound compelled them forward. Captain Tarl found himself shouting alongside the human, barking coordinates and orders that made no sense by Dominion doctrine, yet somehow worked. They fired only when Rains paused to reload, conserving what little energy they had left. For the first time, their disjointed technologies formed a single rhythm, kinetic and plasma, primitive and advanced, brutality wedded to precision. The creatures pressed harder, screeching as they adapted, their hides thickening, movement slowing. They had learned to absorb light and heat, but not steel. Each impact shattered them, breaking momentum, leaving behind carcasses that twitched once and stilled. Rain saw it happening and pushed harder, firing until smoke poured from the barrel, the weapon's frame trembling under sustained fire. He didn't care. The sound itself became language, the roar of survival, the defiance of extinction. He was bleeding now, a dark patch spreading along his side where shrapnel had found him, but his focus never wavered. Between bursts, he glanced at Mesa, her hands steadying as she covered his flank. The terror in her face had transformed into something new, respect, maybe even belief. "Keep your spacing," he told her between gritted teeth. "Don't chase the noise. Let it come to you." She obeyed, mimicking his stance, finding rhythm in his calm. Together, they carved an anchor point in the collapsing defense. One by one, the enemy faltered. The last wave broke against them like surf on stone. When silence finally descended, it was heavy, absolute. The clearing was a graveyard of steam and broken bodies. The acrid tang of propellant hung thick in the air. Rains eased the weapon down, smoke curling from the barrel, his arms trembling from fatigue. The M249 clicked empty, the final belt spent. Captain Tarl approached slowly, helmet under one arm, eyes wide. "That sound," he murmured. "It frightened them." "It should," Rains said, wiping soot from his face. "That's the sound of something that fights back." He looked toward the dark tree line, where the forest still whispered. There was movement out there, faint, distant, watching. Rains flexed his aching hands and began reloading. "They'll come again," he said softly. "Next time, they'll remember the thunder." Dawn crept over Hestara in pale strips of light, revealing the cost of survival with unforgiving clarity. Smoke drifted low across the shattered clearing, and the forest stood scarred, trunks chewed apart by metal and flame. Rain sat on an overturned crate while a med drone sealed his wound, his face drawn but calm. Around him, Valen's soldiers moved with quiet purpose, no longer immaculate, their armor scorched and dented, their expressions subdued by something unfamiliar: humility. Captain Tarl approached without ceremony, stopping a respectful distance away. He studied the battlefield once more before meeting Rains's eyes. "Our analysts confirm it," he said. "The enemy's adaptations render energy weapons inefficient beyond a threshold. Your kinetic solution bypassed every defense." There was no mockery left in his voice, only reluctant admiration. Rains nodded faintly. "Physics doesn't negotiate," he replied. "Mass, velocity, and intent don't care how advanced you think you are." He winced as the drone finished, then waved it off. His attention drifted to the M249 resting nearby, now cleaned and cooling, its presence oddly reassuring amid alien steel. Mesa stepped forward, her crest lowered in a gesture of respect learned overnight. "You saved us," she said simply. "All of us." The words seemed to cost her something, but she spoke them anyway. Rains looked at her, seeing not a soldier bound by doctrine, but one capable of learning. You saved yourselves, he answered. You adapted when it mattered. Later, in the command shelter, a debrief unfolded with unusual silence. Tactical projections replayed the battle, highlighting the moment the kinetic fire turned the tide. Dominion officers exchanged glances, their certainty fractured. Tarl authorized a formal addendum to coalition doctrine, his signature pausing before it finalized. Human Sergeant Rains, he said aloud. Your weapon system and methods will be cataloged for future engagements. Rains gave a tired chuckle. It's not about the gun, he said. It's about knowing when the old ways still work. He stood slowly, joints protesting, and slung his pack over one shoulder. I've done what I came here to do. Outside, transports descended to retrieve the wounded and reinforce the perimeter. The forest remained quiet, but not empty. Rains felt eyes beyond the trees, calculating, remembering. Victory had been loud, impossible to ignore. That worried him more than defeat ever had. Tarl walked with him to the landing pad. The Dominion underestimated your species, the captain admitted. We believed refinement made us superior. Rains paused at the ramp and looked back at the clearing one last time. Refinement's good, he said, but survival's better. He extended a hand, and after a brief hesitation, Tarl clasped it. The gesture was awkward, imperfect, and sincere. As the transport lifted away, Rains watched Hastara shrink beneath drifting clouds. He knew the reports would spread, the laughter would stop, and questions would replace certainty. Somewhere, enemies would adapt again, as they always did. He rested his hand on the familiar weight beside him and allowed himself a thin smile. Humanity didn't need to be the strongest or the smartest. It only needed to endure, and when the galaxy forgot what endurance sounded like, humans were always ready to remind it.